Today we are diving deep into the world of pre-modern India, and we're going to uncover how some towns grew into massive economic and political powerhouses. And the secret ingredient? Well, it's probably not what you're thinking. It was the temple. Let's get into it.
Okay, so just for a second, I want you to picture a temple. What do you see? Is it a quiet, serene place for prayer, a spiritual retreat, kind of separate from the whole hustle and bustle of daily life? All right, hold that image in your mind. Because believe it or not, in early medieval India, the reality was something else entirely. The most powerful temples weren't just quiet places of worship. No, they were more like a central bank, the region's biggest landlord, and city hall, all rolled into one incredible institution. So the big question is, how on earth did a place of worship get that powerful?
Well, it definitely didn't happen by accident. There was a pretty clear blueprint, a kind of formula that involved land, powerful kings, and a really brilliant strategy for building up power.
So we're talking about the early medieval period, right? Roughly from 600 to 1300 CE. This was really the golden age for these temple towns. They absolutely flourished under these incredible South Indian dynasties like the Cholas, the Pallavas, and the Hoysalas. These rulers basically perfected the art of building these sacred cities that were at the same time economic empires.
And the process, it was actually super simple, but man, was it effective. It all started with step 1, royal patronage. You'd have kings granting enormous amounts of tax-free land to a temple and donating just immense wealth. Now, why would they do that? Well, it legitimized their rule. I mean, if you support the gods, it signals that the gods, and by extension, the people, supports you. And this led directly to step 2. The temple itself becomes one of the biggest landowners in the entire kingdom.
And listen, we're not talking about just a little garden plot here. In some regions under the Chola dynasty, historical records show that temples controlled somewhere between 10 to 20% of all the farmable land. Just let that sink in for a second. A single institution controlling up to a fifth of the most valuable economic resource around. This right here, this is the foundation for everything that comes next.
But you see, owning all that land was just the beginning. The truly amazing part is what the temples did with that wealth. They turned it into this incredibly dynamic economic engine, a place where faith and finance weren't just connected, they were completely intertwined.
So, there's actually a term for this, a redistributive economy. Here's how it worked. All that agricultural surplus from the temple's lands, all that grain, flowed into these huge central granaries. And from there, it was systematically redistributed back out into the community. It paid wages for workers, it was food for charity, and it supplied these grand, elaborate rituals. The temple was literally the heart of the city, pumping economic lifeblood through its veins.
And what an employer it was. Think about it. The temple's constant need for construction, for maintenance, for rituals, it created this huge demand for skilled artisans. We're talking sculptors and bronze casters, weavers and carpenters, painters, and of course all the farmers and laborers who worked the land. For so many people, the temple was the main game in town for a good job.
Okay, look at this number, 12 to 15%. Now, what could that possibly have to do with a religious institution?
Well, get this. That was the annual interest rate that temples charged on loans. Yep, you heard me right. We know from these incredibly detailed Chola inscriptions that temples were lending out money to merchants, to farmers, even to entire village councils, and they were charging interest, just like a modern bank. So let's just be really clear here. These institutions were accepting deposits, they were managing wealth, and they were providing credit to the community. They weren't just places of worship. They were, for all intents and purposes, proto-banks. They were the financial backbone of the entire region. But wait, there's more. Their influence didn't just stop with money and land. The temple was also the absolute social and political heartbeat of the city. It was woven into the very fabric of everyday life. For a lot of people, in a pretty tough world, the temple was a vital social safety net. It provided stable wages, it handed out food to the needy every day, and it served as a place of shelter. And here's where it gets political. It was also the town square, the place that hosted local assemblies where all the big community decisions were made. Now this might be one of the most incredible facts of all. The very walls of the temple, they weren't just for decoration. They were essentially a living public archive.
I mean, literally chiseled into the stone for everyone to see were the permanent records of that society. We're talking about land transfers, tax collection details, royal orders, legal decisions, even how much grain was harvested that year. It was a completely transparent, permanent record of the town's most important information. Just wow.
So of course, as these powerful dynasties started to fade, so did this golden age of the temple towns. But their legacy is just so profound, and it really forces us to rethink how we view this whole period of history.
I think the biggest takeaway here is this. These temple towns completely shatter that old, outdated idea of pre-colonial India as some static, sleepy, purely agrarian society. No, what we see instead is proof of sophisticated urban planning, complex economies, and incredibly powerful local institutions that were thriving long before industrialization ever came along.
The historian Burton Stein really summed it up perfectly. He said temples were the nodal points of economic, social, and political life in early medieval South India. They weren't on the sidelines, they were the central hub, the node that connected everything else in that society.
And that really leaves us with a final question to chew on. These temple towns show us a world where the sacred and the secular, where faith and finance were basically one and the same. It kind of makes you wonder, right? What can this lost world teach us about the really intricate links between faith, money, and power that are still shaping our world today?